The wind didn't just blow, it roared like a beast from the pits of some forgotten hell. The sky was an ugly mix of charcoal gray and sickly green, the kind of color that made your gut twist before your brain could explain why. Road signs bent sideways, birds vanished. And every instinct in Elijah Brooks's body said turn back, but his heart, stubborn as steel, wouldn't let him. Elijah had been driving for 17 years. In that time, he'd seen blizzards bury semis and wildfires chase trucks down highways. But this storm, it felt personal, like it was reaching into his soul, testing him. He had no fancy education, no awards to his name, but he had something more valuable in moments like this: grit. He was halfway through his cross-country haul when he heard the emergency broadcast crackle on the radio. Tornado warning in effect for Tulsa County. Take cover immediately. Then static, then silence. Most drivers ahead of him had taken the warning as gospel and pulled off to wait it out in truck stops or under overpasses. Not Elijah. Something in him refused to stop. Maybe it was the silence that came after his wife died, the same silence that followed him into that rig every day. Or maybe it was the way he thought about his two boys growing up in a world too busy to notice men like him. Whatever it was, he kept driving, until he saw it. A flash of silver in a ditch. An SUV flipped upside down, steam hissing from the engine. The rain was coming sideways now, pelting the earth like nails. Elijah squinted through his cracked windshield and saw movement. A hand. No, a pair of hands. He yanked the wheel hard, pulled his truck to the side, and jumped down into the madness. The second his boots hit the mud, the wind nearly lifted him off his feet. But he planted himself wide and solid like an oak tree and ran. The SUV was worse up close, crumpled, glass everywhere, and the groan of metal shifting under pressure. Inside, a woman was crying out, blood streaking her forehead. In the back, a teenage boy banged weakly on the window, his other arm clearly broken. And beside the woman sat a man, unconscious, head slumped forward, jacket soaked with blood. Elijah didn't hesitate. He reached the woman first, kicking in the shattered window and pulling her out through the passenger side. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp. She clutched his arm. "My son and my husband, please." He turned back, ignoring the wind that threatened to spin him in place. It took everything he had to get that boy out without making his injury worse. Then he dragged the man last, whose chest barely moved with breath. Elijah didn't know who any of them were, but in that moment they were his responsibility. As they scrambled toward the truck, the sound came. That sound, like a freight train with no tracks. The tornado had touched down, and it was coming straight for them. Elijah shoved all three into the cab of his truck and slammed the door shut behind them. He barely had time to throw himself in before the funnel tore across the field just 50 yards away. Trees lifted like toys. A barn exploded into splinters. His entire rig shook as though some invisible hand was trying to rip it apart bolt by bolt. Inside, the boy was screaming. The woman was sobbing. The man, still unconscious, was fading fast. Elijah said nothing. He gritted his teeth and braced himself against the steering wheel, whispering a prayer his mother taught him when he was 10. And then, silence. Not the comforting kind. The heavy, ringing kind that follows a storm and leaves you wondering if the world will ever sound normal again. The worst had passed, but the aftermath was just beginning. It took 2 hours before rescue crews arrived. Roads were blocked, power lines down. When they reached the battered truck, the paramedics rushed the man into an ambulance. He had suffered a concussion and internal bleeding, but would survive. The woman clutched Elijah's hand and whispered a thank you that shook with more than just fear. Her name was Rachel, and her son Mason looked at Elijah like he was seeing Superman. But Elijah just gave a quiet nod. No big speeches, no dramatics. As they pulled away, Elijah was left alone, covered in mud and rain, standing by his rig, engine humming like it had witnessed a war and lived to tell it. He thought it was over. It wasn't. 3 days later, Elijah sat in a small diner on the outskirts of Tulsa. He was nursing a bitter coffee and staring out the window when a black SUV pulled up outside. A man in a suit stepped out, followed by 2 more. They scanned the diner and locked eyes with Elijah. "Mr. Brooks?" one of them asked. Elijah nodded slowly. "We have someone who'd like to thank you personally." Before Elijah could respond, the door opened again. And in walked the man he had pulled from the SUV, the one whose head had been bleeding, who hadn't spoken a word that stormy day. But now he was Stywar,